Well, good morning. Today we're going to come back to our study in the book of Mark. After Christmas break in a month of January, we focused on prayer. We're going to get back to Mark. You know, the one thing I love about Scripture is that it's amazing how that Jesus, through the Gospels, uncovers some of the most important topics that affect our lives and how we live. Now, today we're going to look at really a subject that goes like this: how we see ourselves and how we see others. It shapes who we are, how we feel, what we're gonna do. I had a friend who grew up in California, and he said that he and his buddies, they surfed before surfing was cool. They used the big, large wooden boards with the metal fin on it, and he said that people were always asking, he and his buddies, now, you got about the sharks. They would say something like, you gotta be careful with the sharks. You know, the sharks might get you. And he said, honestly, he says, I never saw a shark. I was surfing in Huntington Beach. And he said, people often overstate the big scary and forget about the quiet, invisible things that really do make a difference. He said, actually, between 5 and 6 people only, I say that only, it's tough if it's you, right? But only 5 and 6 people worldwide are killed because of shark attacks. However, between 40 and 60 people a year are killed by jelly bee stings. And we don't even talk about jelly beans. We don't have, jelly beans. What am I talking about? Yeah, jellyfish. Jelly beans are fine. Yeah, you eat all you want, okay. But imagine 50 to 60 jellyfish stings kill people, okay? There's more than that, but today in the book of Mark, we're gonna notice there are some of those invisible but very present things going on in our lives that affect us. This passage, beginning in Mark 30, it uncovers this most destructive thing that has destroyed many relationships. I mean, it's brought conflict to dormitories. It's brought chaos and ineffectiveness to organizations. I mean, it has melted the beautiful romance budding in a couple's relationship. It's destroyed marriages and families. It can bring bitterness and ugliness to a dinner table. It even has divided churches and stolen the sweet fellowship that God intends for his people. And so what is it? It's jealousy and envy. Proverbs 27:4 says this: wrath is cruel and anger a torrent, but who is able to stand before jealousy? I'm gonna tell you what, have you ever had somebody really angry at you? I mean, wrath is scary. And anger is described like you know, a rushing water in a storm. But who can stand before jealousy? And we see a clear thread of this throughout Scripture. But let's begin reading in verse 30. Then they departed from there and passed through Galilee, and he did not want anyone to know it. For he taught his disciples and said to them, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and after he is killed, he'll rise again the third day. But they did not understand this saying, and they were afraid to ask. I mean, Jesus is trying to get his disciples away from the crowd because he knows that the clock is ticking and he is headed for why he came to earth in the first place. He's headed toward a crucifixion. And he talks about this plainly in Mark chapter 8, 9, and 10. I'm going to be killed, and then I'm gonna rise the third day. And he repeats it and repeats it and repeats it. But the disciples, they don't like that. They want a triumphant Messiah who walks in and defeats his foes and sets up his kingdom. This suffering servant Messiah Jesus is describing is beyond their understanding. They can hardly believe it. And they don't even want to ask any questions. You know, sometimes we don't ask questions because we don't want to know. I live with a little guy, my son James. He's not in the service today. James is 27. He has Down syndrome. He's so wonderful, and everything's clear to him. When we talk about subject he doesn't like, he'll say to me, "Skip that one," and he's out. You know, I've heard people say that the only reason people want to get saved is because they want to find a way to heaven. Well, I know one guy that is not looking to go to heaven, and that is James. Anytime I talk about heaven, he looks at me and he says, "Dad, skip that one." Because you know what? He knows everybody in his family who is in heaven died. And he says to me, "I know die." Well, I'm not going to convince him otherwise at this point. No need. The disciples didn't want to hear what Jesus had to say. You're going to die? And you're going to rise on the third day? In verse 33, then he came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What was it that you disputed among yourselves on the road?" And they kept silent. For on the road, they had disputed among themselves who would be the greatest. And he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone desires to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all." Then he took a little child and set him in the midst of them. And when he had taken him in his arms, he said, "Whoever receives one of these little children in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives not me, but him who sent me." And so Jesus is talking to the disciples, and there's a problem. Like there's been a discussion. What was the discussion about? It was about how they saw themselves and how they saw other people. They were arguing over who would be the greatest. That's the wrong question. You know, God has made every single one of us very uniquely, specifically, with a plan and a purpose. And when we compare each other to each other, and we decide to rank one another based upon whatever evaluation we have, and we diminish ourselves or we diminish the value of other people, we've completely missed the point. The point is, you need to be the best you God created you to be. You need to do what you can do. You need to accomplish your plan and your purpose. You know, when you think about the 12 disciples, I mean, how many of the disciples do we really know? Not very many. You might know Matthew, Peter, James, and John, Philip. I don't know how many you know, but there's a group of those 12 that we know almost nothing about except their name. And each one of them is different than the other, and Jesus intentionally pulled together guys with different talents, abilities, personalities. He says, I just want you to be you. This arguing about who is going to be the greatest of all, that's not the issue. This whole idea of wanting to be great actually flows from something that is very good, and that is that we want our lives to count. I don't want to live and die and not have done anything to help anyone or accomplish anything. Do you? No, we have a desire to make a difference in the world. I mean, that's why we love our superheroes. I don't know what your superhero is named. I mean, you know, there's Batman, there's Superman, there's Spider-Man, there's Iron Man, there's Ant-Man. I tell you what, we have plenty of them. I'm just saying. I discovered that my little 3-year-old granddaughter, Eleanor, she loves Spider-Woman. Didn't even know that was a thing. But my son said, no, Spider-Woman is just like Spider-Man, but pink. She even had gloves on, her Spider-Woman gloves. Who knew? Why? We have a deep desire to make a difference in the world. But because of our fallenness, sometimes we take that desire and we turn it into a competition. So who's the greatest of all here? I was at the funeral of my mother. This pastor friend of ours who has been very successful in politics and ministry, he comes up to my brother and I says, okay, which one is the richest between the two of you? I'm like, seriously, buddy, at my mom's funeral, you're talking about this? Who cares? We turn into a competition. When we compare ourselves to other people to try to see that we're good enough, we make a mistake. When we decide that we want to be the greatest of all, and if that means I win, you lose, we've gotten it all wrong. No. I don't have to be you. I can't be you. I will never be a great you, and you can never be a great me. We just need to be who we are with the strength of God directing us. You know, this whole idea of jealousy and envy runs throughout the entire Bible. In Genesis chapter 4, the first two brothers, you know what we read? We read that they both bring offerings to God. And one is a farmer and he brings the fruit that he's produced. And the other one watches the flock and he brings an animal. And I've heard so many theories about what that's all about. But what I don't often hear is the fact that Abel's offering was accepted, Cain's offering was not. But then there is this conversation between God and Cain. Cain was not rejected. God asked Cain, why are you so angry that your brother's offering was accepted and yours isn't? I mean, why are you angry? Why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not well, sin lies at the door, and a desire is for you, but you shall rule over it. And then Cain took his brother out to the field and killed him. The first murder is because of envy and jealousy. And the dialogue between Cain and God was, I'm ready to bless you. Would you do good? Do good and I will bless you. But Cain wouldn't listen. And he diverted to envy and jealousy. You know, there's another story in the Old Testament, David and Saul. David, man, this young man with great courage comes to the rescue of King Saul and volunteers, kind of like a sacrificial lamb, to go out and fight Goliath. I mean, I don't think anybody was very confident that David was going to win. And David goes out on the field, and after trying out the armor of King Saul, he says, man, I can't even move in this. This is not fit for me. I'm just going to go out and be who I am, a shepherd boy with a slingshot and some stones. And he goes out and he puts a stone in that slingshot. And David is just being the best David he can be. He's not trying to be Saul. And he approaches Goliath and he says, I'm coming to you in the name of God. You're defying the people of God. And he kills Goliath that day. And everybody's shocked, especially Goliath. But everybody's shocked. This immediately catapults David into the military, and he becomes one of the most successful military leaders, even at a young age, that the entire nation had ever seen. And Saul's pretty happy. You know, if you get the good people on your team, you win, right? David is winning like crazy. And then one day, Saul hears the chant that's been developed. Saul has killed his thousands. Saul has killed his thousands. And Saul is just, man, he's enjoying that moment. And then they go to the second verse. And David, his 10,000s. And Saul immediately takes a turn. It changes the course of the history of Israel because Saul is so angry and consumed with jealousy and envy that from that day on, he seeks to kill David. How ridiculous is it to kill one of your strongest producing generals? Are you kidding me? Why would you be so ridiculous as to kill the guy who's winning more often than anyone else? Envy and jealousy can do that to you. Let me ask you a question. When you think about all the people in your life, family, at work, who do you envy? Who are you jealous of? Who is that person that comes to family dinner that you're annoyed that they're so successful? You're trying to watch out for the sharks, but the jellyfish is right there. And the jellyfish is envy and jealousy. And it will destroy you. James 3:13-16 says this: Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. It's important for us to explore areas in our life where envy and jealousy are taking over. How come I'm not more beautiful or talented? How come I haven't had the breaks other people have had? And what we do is we can be consumed. And that's what was going on with the disciples. Here's some steps to defeat envy and jealousy in your life. Number one, thank God for what we have. You know, when you're envious and jealous, you don't even see the abundance of blessings that God has brought to your life. Number one, thank God. God, man, what am I thinking about why I feel like they're more blessed than I am? I'm setting that aside. That's not my business. God, I see what you have done for me. I am grateful for what you had given me. I choose to be content and to live in gratitude. That's the first step. Number two, pray for God to bless those you envy. Now, wait a second here. They're already plenty blessed. Why would I pray that God will bless them more? Because that is the antidote to get that out of your spirit. Say, God, thank you for blessing them. I pray that you'd bless them more. Refuse to be their enemy. Choose to rejoice with them in their blessedness. 3, remember, they didn't get your blessing. God's got plenty of blessings. You seek the Lord. The Lord wants to watch over you and bless you and take care of you. Sometimes I think we have this thing that switches in our mind where we're thinking, boy, they're blessed. That should have been mine. Have you ever felt that way? I know you all are saints. You're looking at me like, no, of course that never has happened, but you've got to battle it. Thank God for what you have and choose to be grateful and live in contentedness. Number 2, You need to pray for those you envy. Don't fight them. Don't make them your enemy. Love them. Thank God for his goodness to them. He didn't give them your blessing. So just praise God that he's that generous. Okay, number 3, trust that God is going to bless you. He knows what to do. Second thing in this passage that we want to look at is this, verse 38. Now John answered him saying, Teacher, we saw someone who does not follow us casting out demons in your name, and we forbade them because they don't follow us. Okay. Jesus said, don't forbid him, for no one who works a miracle in my name can soon afterwards speak evil of me, for he who is not against us is for us. Now, this is so interesting because in this very same chapter, the disciples' problem at the beginning was that they tried to cast out a demon in that man's son, remember that? And they were unable to do that. So I don't know if they were a little bit sensitive to their very recent failure, but nevertheless, as they're arguing who's the greatest and trying to jockey for position, John says, well, we saw a guy casting out demons in your name, Jesus, and we told him to stop. Are you kidding me? How is the kingdom of God benefited when you stop someone from casting out a demon that has been tormenting somebody for so long? And Jesus affirms that they were casting out a demon in the name of Jesus. Jesus says, no. Remember, the 12 were not the only ones who Jesus commissioned to go out and cast out demons. You know, we should bless the work of God in circles that we're not a part of. Now, I want to just admit to you something. I come from a good long line of fundamentalist Baptists. And if we are expert at one thing, we're expert at picking apart everybody's mistakes from our perspective. It's exhausting. I remember one of the best things God ever allowed me to do was to be invited and included in a Doctor of Ministries program in Manila. It was a cross-denominational group of men, and everybody in the room had to be a pastor and leader of a ministry to qualify to get into the program. And I went there because, I needed the education. I needed to improve. And I sat in that class, and as I looked around, I began to hear their stories and hear about their ministries. Some of them I had heard about and had observed their churches and ministers grow and flourish. Some I had never heard of, but as they talked, I realized, boy, God is doing big work here in the Philippines that I don't even know about. Thousands and thousands of people are coming to Christ. And yeah, these, my brothers in this room, we don't all agree on everything. We don't all do everything the same way. But I know that what we do agree on is that the gospel of Jesus Christ is the only hope for the world. And every one of us celebrated in our conversation the people that had come to faith and accepted Christ, and how their lives had changed. Man, I tell you what, I was so enriched. It was incredible. There was one man, this man was in our group. His name was Peter Tanchi. And I remember him and his wife. Peter Tanchi came from a very wealthy family. In his testimony time, he said, have you ever heard of somebody who's been born with a silver spoon in their mouth? Well, he says, mine was not a silver spoon. Mine was platinum. My family was so well off. We had so much wealth. And then he described how the thing that he loved most was to talk about the gospel of Jesus. And as a young man, he joined an international team from Campus Crusade for Christ, and he traveled the world with this group, and that's where he met his wife and married her. And now they had returned to the Philippines, and they started a church, and the church he started was a church that was built on small groups that met in people's homes. And today, the Christ Commission Fellowship has between, I don't know what the real number is, between 75 and 150,000 people who attend worship in their churches all over the Philippines every week. And this man will not be remembered for his great wealth, although he has it. He will be remembered for his great love for Jesus Christ. And while he manages his business, you can tell his heart and soul is in the church God has allowed him to plant. Incredible guy. I got to looking at some of the video clips that he has produced, and in one of those video clips, he talked about going through very hard times. And I remember when this happened, but he talked about when his children were at home. His daughter was at home with a couple of her friends, and there was a home invasion. And he says, and my daughter and the other girls were violated. My daughter was raped 7 times. And he says, I still cry when I remember that. And then there's a clip of his daughter who says in that clip, you know, it was the most awful thing. She describes a little bit. She says, but the Lord has given me healing. And now I am married to this wonderful man who loves me so much. And we have 6 children. This family is going to be remembered for the grace of God at work in their life and the power of God who works in their life. These disciples, they were struggling because they had the wrong focus. I want you to succeed in every way you possibly can. I pray that you will find success at work, in your education, in your families. Do you not want that for everybody in this room? This is not, I win, you lose. No, this is, I want you to win. And we have a God who wants every one of us to win. And we will celebrate all the blessings he gives. Lastly, you know, Jesus doesn't, in this passage as it's recorded in Mark, he doesn't give a very strong rebuke to the disciples. He just redirects them in 2 ways. First of all, he says, don't you know that the greatest of all is the servant of all? Every one of us can be the greatest of all by serving the people around us. It's in service that our souls get filled up. It's not in our boasting. It's when we humble ourselves in service. Jesus goes on in verse 41 to say this, for whoever gives you a cup of water to drink in my name, because you belong to Christ, assuredly, I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward. You know what Jesus is saying? He's saying, don't you know that, like, I'm watching everything. You think I'm all about the big stuff, the on-stage stuff? That's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at everything. Some of you need to be on stage because I've gifted you to do that. Some of you don't need to be on stage, and you just be who you are. Even if you give a cup of cold water, you will be noticed and rewarded because God's going to be saying, good job. You know what? In this church today, there will be hundreds and hundreds of servant tasks done by the volunteers who serve in Sunday school and Kids Street and youth, who are on the hospitality team, who open doors. I mean, those people who make everything run on stage, the lights, the music, the sound, the live stream. Even those people in the parking lot. Now today it's raining, so I don't know if they're all out there right now, but you know, I love our parking lot people. And Jesus says, hey, here's the deal. When you serve, I always see it. And I will reward you. So keep serving. It all matters. I don't just reward what everybody thinks are the star positions, because I know that every position is absolutely needed. You know, this week we're going to host a Night to Shine. We'll have 175 adults with special needs in the building, and it's the Tim Tebow Night to Shine. It's like a prom. They will arrive. There will be hair and makeup and shoes shining. There will be a limousine ride, paparazzi. There will be a karaoke room. Boy, it's one of the funnest rooms. There will be dancing, because there's no keeping these people from dancing, because they will come here and we will love them, and we will pray that God will bless and give us a spirit of joy. And I've watched it year after year after year, and they just. And Cindy, my wife, has been calling through the guests, especially those that have complicated special needs situations, making sure we have all the information we need, and knowing who their companions are. Do they have a nurse with them? What are their dietary restrictions? What do they? I mean, are they going to be bothered by the lights and the loud clapping of the paparazzi? Because we'll coach the paparazzi to just be smiling without noise, because we're here to make this work for them. And she was telling me about one lady that she called, and she said, I'm so glad that my daughter can go. She says, honey, she told my wife, she said, he comes and tells me the stories, okay? She says, honey, I have adopted 5 special needs kids, and she was the last one I adopted, and now I'm so elderly. I can't take care of her. So she doesn't live with me. She's in a home. I can't hardly take care of myself because I'm so elderly, but thank you for providing this for my daughter. One man called and he says, I'm calling because, my client is, well, let me just put it this way. He's in a home with several other people, and because he's so complicated and so he has such difficulties, he never goes anywhere. The others go places, but he just can't go anywhere. And we thought maybe we would try to at least bring him to this, because he doesn't ever go anywhere. But I'm calling because I don't want him to be a distraction or a bother. He's going to bounce the ball all the time. That's sort of like how he calms down. And is that going to be a problem? And he may not even last very long. He may only last a few minutes or half hour. And Cindy said to him, no, you bring him, even if he lasts for just a few minutes. He says, well, we're an hour or more away, so we will travel that far. But this guy's going to get dressed. He's going to go to a party. And he's going to stay as long as he can and leave when he needs to. And we're going to say to him, hey, listen, there's a good God in heaven who sees you and cares for you. Why do we do this stuff? Because our King, Jesus, he came to serve. and to give his life a ransom for many. He didn't come with power and authority to vanquish his foes. He came to defeat the evils of this world with a love that is beyond description. He died for us on a cross. He died in our place, and then he rose again. And the disciples didn't want to hear that story at first. But then they kept telling that story. We're going to share communion today, and I'm going to ask you to get out the